morning to all of you. Today, Dr. Vijay Raj Singh, as the coordinator of Science Lecture Series 2, takes this opportunity to welcome you all to the webinar by the Physics Department at Central University South Bihar Gaya. Honorable Speaker Dr. R.J. Chaudhary Saab, respected Head of Department, and my dear friends. I extend a warm welcome to all of you and participants of this webinar today. We all have gathered here for a webinar on a very interesting topic that is probing the magnetic properties of thin films of magnetic material. And I assure you all that you will truly enjoy this session and will definitely take some learning today. Now I request to Head of Department, Professor Venkatesh Singh, who is the chairman of this session, to introduce our esteemed guest of today's webinar and request him to present his talk, Professor Venkatesh Singh.
Thank you, Vijay Rajji. Hello, everyone. Namaste and very good morning. This is Venkatesh of Central University of South Bihar Gaya. Today I welcome all of you on behalf of the organizing committee of this virtual science lecture series, which is organized by the Department of Physics, School of Physical and Chemical Sciences, Central University of South Bihar Gaya. I would like to thank all the online participants for showing their interest and taking part in the session second 8th lecture of this science lecture series 2020. Today we have the pleasure of having one of the renowned scientists, a physicist, very dynamic researcher, Professor Ram Janay Chaudhary from University Grant Commission, DAE, Department of Atomic Energy Consortium, for scientific research Indore with us. I welcome you, Professor Ram, to this science lecture series on behalf of organizing team and on my behalf. Professor Ram will speak on probing the magnetic properties of thin film of magnetic materials. Professor Ram earned his doctorate degree from University of Pune in collaboration with University of Maryland College for USA and Inter-University Accelerator Center, New Delhi in year 2005. Professor Ram was Embark Fellow in Trinity College, Ireland during 2005 to 2006. Professor Ram is expert of structural, electrical, magnetic, magnetotransport, and resonant photoemission studies of magnetic oxide, thin film, and heterostructures. Professor Ram has a list of awards on his name, including DAE Young Scientist Award 2013 and DAE Group Achievement Award 2017. Presently, he is a senior scientist in his institute. Professor Ram is well-traveled and internationally well-known figure in his area of research. As I have mentioned just before, I hope today's lecture will motivate master's students towards solid-state physics. I sincerely believe that this lecture would draw huge attention to the knowledge-loving undergraduate and postgraduate physics students, as well as young and dynamic faculties connected virtually in this lecture to listen here. As I have always mentioned before each lecture, that our speakers are nationally and internationally renowned and real gems of their area. Therefore, they do not need detailed introduction. However, for curious, young, and motivated participants, we have already uploaded his very short CV on the Science Lecture Series website as well as Facebook. Dear participants, colleagues, and friends, if you have any queries and questions related to this lecture, please write them down in the chat box. At the end of this lecture, Secretary of this Science Lecture Series, Dr. Puneet Misra ji, will ask your question on your behalf. Once again, I welcome you, Professor Ram. We are really grateful to you for accepting our request of delivering today's lecture, sharing knowledge and time with us for your busy schedule. With these few words, I would like to request Professor Ram Janay Chaudhary ji to please deliver his talk on probing the magnetic property of thin film of magnetic material. Professor Ram, please deliver yourself.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And thanks to everyone over there for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. And actually, visiting Gaya was a long due course, which unfortunately couldn't occur earlier. And okay, even virtually now we are connecting with each other. So that's a great joy for me. To be related to you, to be connected to you, and to discuss some of our own ideas, and invite all of you over there who wish to, pursue their research career and can see that our institute can be of any help to their research purpose in future. So again, thanks to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to come to you. Frankly speaking, I was under the impression that my talk will start at 11:30 in the morning. So I was a bit, lazy or casual in my approach. But thanks to call by Dr. Vijay saying that, okay, I have to get ready. So anyway, so I'm all set and ready to go. And I request all the participants to note down their queries, and wherever they may feel that they need certain clarification and things of that nature, they can just drop their message in the chat box, and I will be happy to take up all of them. And I was not sure what kind of audience I may have, but it appears to me that most of the participants are from master's background, and I had that intuition in mind, and that's why I kept my talk at a very, very elementary level. So those who are experienced, those who are very well known to the field, can excuse me for being so naive and being so at the introductory level. But my purpose is to address those who are at the beginning stage and can also pursue their research career in time to come. So with these introductory remarks, I start my presentation. And okay, the title of my talk is very well known to you, Probing the Magnetic Properties of Thin Films of Magnetic Material. So you can see that the title contains a few words like probing, magnetic, thin films, and magnetic materials. We'll just touch upon all these individual words and try to see that what they mean, and how at the end of the day they come together to give us a certain flavor of the idea of the topic. So this is Indian map, and in this Indian map, you can see that I belong to UGCDA Consortium for Scientific Research Center, and this UGCDA CSR is located at 4 different places in the country with its office. But frankly speaking, our representatives are the users of this consortium, who are actually spread throughout the country, right from Jammu Kashmir to Kanyakumari. So in a way, our presence is all over the country, and only thing is that our offices, contact offices, or the experimental stations are located at these 4 different places. One is in Mumbai, Kolkata, Indore, and Calcutta. And at all these 4 places, you can see that the Department of Atomic Energy has created mega research science facilities. So our mandate, our purpose is to serve university users or any educational institutes researcher, and support them for their research purpose, and extend the kind of facilities which we are having at our consortium. And so you all are free to use these facilities. Of course, due to this lockdown, we had this shutdown period for a few months, but now with unlocking process, we are also unlocking our experimental facilities, and at present we are asking for the samples, whatever the measurements they may require, to send by speed post for a few months, and when system improves, then eventually we invite students as well as researchers or faculty to visit these places and do their research themselves and perform their experiments. So this is a temporary arrangement at present, and let me just tell you that to visit these places, you do not have to pay anything. To do those experiments, you do not have to pay anything. You you just have to put your request in the user form. Now, user portal is available at this csr.res.in, and where you can just do request, and depending on the availability of the slot and the time, you will be given a slot for those measurements. So you all are free to use these facilities, and remember, your accommodation will be taken care by us. So you do not have to worry about the about any financial part, be it travel, be it your logistics of staying at the local station. What you have to worry about is your research problem, and you just come out with your research problem, and the scientists here, faculty here, will help you out in those experiments. So these are the list of facilities which are available at our consortium. This is just some of them, not all of them, because this is long back slide which was prepared, and I'm a bit lazy to further update it. But you can just follow our webpage, and you can see that what are the new additions to this list has been made, and you can look at those facilities and see that which facility is useful to you for research purpose. In Indore Center, we are mostly related with this material science and solid species, and you can understand that for any material science, you have to prepare material. So you have to have synthesization technique. After synthesization technique, you have to have characterization technique. Then question arises, what type of characterization you need? So that characterization can be related to your structural property, electrical property, magnetic property, transport property, thermal property, surface property, spectroscopic property, so wide range of properties that these materials show. Accordingly, you should have wide range of facilities to probe those properties. And that is why you can see that we have a list of such facilities which are available. You can just visit our webpage and see that what are the facilities and what are their status. So you can just drop your message and saying that you need these facilities. Okay, so this is my group, and this is the current group. Of course, this is a bit older one, and we have to further update. And these are the old students who have done their PhD, and they are working at their respective places. And yeah, I enjoy the trouble that they provide us, and I also enjoy their care and their support and their guiding us. I mean, we always say that we are the supervisors or we are the student, but it's other way around. They are actually guide to us, because they come out with all sorts of different problems, and with all those different problems, we understand new things, and that is how this knowledge is actually transferred to the new generation. Anyway, so my plan of talk is, you can see that, as I mentioned earlier, that this is related to the words which is coming up in our title. So I'll be talking about the magnetic properties or the magnetic materials, then how to size those materials, thin film techniques or the solid state reaction technique, then thin films of functional magnetic oxides, and then I will just conclude if we have sufficient time. Now, to start with, what is magnetic moment? Because see, I mean, when we talk about the magnetic properties, then the easiest thing that we generally ask or we generally know is the magnetic property of the material is given or is known or is understood by the magnetizers. Now, what is magnetization? The origin of magnetization comes from the origin of magnetic moment. Now, what is the origin of magnetic moment in any material? Now, if I talk of in any material, then the easiest thing that I can think that any material will contain the elements in its composition. The elements will have certain atomic configuration. In that atomic configuration, you have electrons, you have protons, and you have neutrons. So the whole story is like confined to only the stories of protons, electrons, and neutrons. If we understand the behavior of this proton, neutron, and electron and its response to the external perturbation, that external perturbation can be X-ray, that external perturbation can be external pressure, or anything, or even the incident photon, how do they respond? If we understand that, then we understand many of these properties of these materials, right? So let me start by saying that in any atom, we have electrons, protons, and neutrons, and electrons are the most responsible parameter for many of these properties. So I have started my presentation by understanding what is actually electron. So if you look at electron, electrons have certain intrinsic property. हम लोग कक्षा 8-9 से पढ़ते चले आते हैं कि इलेक्ट्रॉन का मास होता है, इलेक्ट्रॉन का चार्ज होता है. फिर और जब बड़े हुए इंटर तक पहुंचे तो हमें ये भी पता चला कि इलेक्ट्रॉन है सर्टेन इंट्रिंसिक एंगुलर मोमेंटम h cut by 2, जहां हम लोगों ने देखा that not all the 4 quantum numbers of electrons can be same, 2 electrons, right? So from there we had this notion of, or the origin of the idea of electrons intrinsic angular momentum. So we know that the electrons have these 3 very fundamental properties which are there. Besides that, these electrons are not stationary particles. They always keep moving. And we also many charged particles which is moving. It creates a magnetic field. इसका information कहाँ से मिला? This information we got from Biot-Savart law. If you remember class 8, class 9 textbook. What is Biot-Savart law? Any current carrying loop creates a magnetic field at certain distance given by P equals I dl cross R upon R cube and something like that, some constant of that nature, right? So what is that current carrying loop? Current carrying loop is nothing but the motion of electrons. How do you get current? Current is nothing but the flow of charge carrier. In this particular case, electron is the charge carrier because electron has the charge. So that electron which is having motion creates a current, and any current carrying loop creates a magnetic field. So any moving charge creates a magnetic field, and in our atom, if you look at the electron's motion, the electron is moving with 2 types of motion. One is the orbital motion and another is the spin motion. So if I consider simply the orbital motion, that means that motion will also create a magnetic field. So in a way, this electron is behaving like a tiny magnet. Similarly, spin motion, that motion will also create a magnetic field, and we can treat that part also of electron's motion as a tiny magnet. Now, if you look at the behavior of a tiny magnet or a bar magnet, tiny magnet का मतलब हमारे पास एक magnetic dipole है. Magnetic dipole means you have 2 magnetic poles with opposite polarity separated by a certain distance. This is what a bar magnet is all about. Now, if you just put a tiny magnet in presence of certain external magnetic field, now what will magnetic field do? The magnetic field will act a force on the individual magnetic pole, which is equivalent to P into H. Now see, you have 2 magnetic poles opposite in polarity. So force on this plus P will be opposite to the direction of the force upon this magnetic pole. But remember, since the pole strength is same, the force is same, only thing is that they are acting in opposite direction but not at the same point, at different points. So 2 equal forces working opposite to each other at certain distance creates a couple, force couple, right? So that couple has a tendency to align that particular dipole in the direction of magnetic field. So what it does, it creates a torque. Now what is torque? Torque is nothing but R cross F. Okay, so in this case, F is pH, and your R you can calculate is like L by 2 sine theta. So your torque becomes PHL sine theta. So if you just look at this P into L, I have kept it here M. So it is equal to MS sine theta. So this M is P dot L. That is nothing but the magnetic moment. What is magnetic moment? Remember, if you have this H equals 1, sine theta equals 1. So when is sine theta equals 1? When there this angle is 90 degrees. So in that particular case, your torque will be the maximum. So how we can define magnetic moment? This is the magnetic torque acting on a magnetic dipole to align in the direction of magnetic field. So that becomes the magnetic moment, or kuch nahi hai. And the total magnetic moment per unit volume in a given material is the magnetization. As simple as that. So what is the energy of this magnetic dipole? So the energy you can easily calculate. Energy is nothing but the force into displacement. तो force तो आपका pH था, या torque से अगर निकालना है तो and now since it rotates from this pi by 2 to angle certain theta, so you have this mh cos theta. So the energy of a dipole in a magnetic field at certain angle is given by m dot h. What does this tell you? That energy is minimized when it aligns in the direction of magnetic field, right? Otherwise, there will be always acting a torque on this magnetic dipole. Now, this is a this was just a normal understanding that how a magnetic moment is generated. Now, as I said, that the electron has two types of motion, orbital motion and spin motion. And from there, I connected that this orbital motion can be related with the magnetic dipole or a tiny magnet. And similarly, the spin part is also acting like a magnetic field. So that is also acting like a tiny magnet, right? So what is the contribution or what is the magnetic moment because of this orbital motion or the spin motion? Let's try to understand that. Now, as I said, that this orbital motion will create a kind of current, and from the Ampere's law, we know that the magnetic moment of a current carrying loop in the area pi a square is given by m equals I into a. And the direction of this magnetic moment is perpendicular to the plane of current. You can see here, if the orbital motion is in this way, then the magnetic moment will have direction in this particular direction. So you can see that this creates a magnetic moment which is equivalent to I dot A, which is perpendicular to the plane of the current. And then this, if you look at this I, what is I? Current. How do we define current? We define current by charge moving per unit time. What is charge? E. What is time? So the time that it takes to complete one rotation. How do we calculate that? The time is given by the distance divided by the velocity, right? Sorry, it's other way around. Velocity divided by the total distance that is traveling, right? So if I consider that the velocity is v, what is the total distance that it is traveling? The total distance is the periphery. What is periphery? 2 pi a into this. So this 2 pi a. So the actual current that it is giving is like v upon 2 pi a multiplied by the charge, right? So the magnetic moment that it is creating is given by EV divided by 2 pi a, which is current, multiplied by area. What is area? Pi into a square. So the magnetic moment that we are getting is like minus EVA by 2. That is all right. That is the magnetic moment. But if you just look at the orbital angular momentum, what is orbital angular momentum? Angular momentum is nothing but the moment of momentum. What is momentum? Momentum is mass into velocity. Now, what is moment of momentum? Momentum cross distance r, or in this case, it is a. So the orbital angular momentum is given by mv cross a. So the magnitude of orbital angular momentum is MEVA, right? Now just see, this magnetic moment is also like VA upon 2. So that means this magnetic moment is connected with the orbital angular momentum. So this magnetic moment is connected to the orbital angular momentum. I mean, you do not, you calculate the VA value from here, which will give you L upon ME, and you just put it here. So what do you get? E into L upon M, right? So this is what it is written, E upon 2ME into L, right? So what does it? It tells us that the magnetic moment or the orbital magnetic moment of electron is connected to the orbital angular momentum by this expression. And also that the direction of this orbital angular momentum is opposite to its magnetic moment, right? So M and L are oppositely directed. Remember this. So I mean, in a nutshell, I can say that the magnetic moment is depending on the mass of the charge particle, because it is E upon 2ME, remember, right? Now, why do we consider only the electron? Why not the nucleus? In nucleus, we have protons also. Proton is also equally positively charged, right? So why don't we consider that? Remember, the nucleus or the protons are much, much heavier than the electron. how much, I mean, their mass is like almost 3 orders of magnitude higher, 1000 times higher. So accordingly, your magnetic moment also becomes that much of smaller. So that becomes negligible as compared to the magnetic moment contribution given the electron, right? So that's why we do not consider at most of the time the contribution of nucleus towards the overall magnetic property of a given material. We generally are much happier while talking about the electrons, right? So you can see that this magnetic moment or the orbital magnetic moment is connected with the orbital angular momentum, and they are oppositely directed. And we can just say that this is the relation between magnetic moment and the orbital angular. Now remember that if you look at this orbital angular momentum, then we know that there are certain quantization rules, and it can have only allowed values of ml values in the direction of z, right? So you can have 0 or plus minus 1 or plus minus 2, and accordingly the magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic field can be only this much well, right? So if I just take ml as the unit, then this particular constant, which is like E h cut upon 2me, this is a unit, and that unit we could term as Bohr magneton. So this is the smallest unit of magnetic moment that is generally used. Remember, the magnitude of orbital angular momentum is given by E h cut upon 2me square root of L into L plus 1, and that is always higher than any of this Z component of orbital magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic. So this, please remember that the magnitude is given by under root L into L plus 1, but the Z component is, these are the discrete values, because you have only the allowed values ml h cut, and this ml can be 0 or plus minus 1 or plus minus 2, etc. You just put those values here and you get the magnetic moment for a given value of ml in the direction of field. Okay, so that was all about the orbital motion of the electron. What about the spin motion? So similarly, spin motion also gives rise to this kind of behavior. Only thing is that in this previous case, your allowed value of ml could have been 0 plus minus 1 plus minus 2, but we know that the spin quantum number allows only plus minus half value. So in that way, this is a very discrete value, and similarly, the magnitude is given by under root s into s plus 1, which is like under root 3 by 2 times h cut. So in this particular case, your this spin magnetic moment is given by EH cut upon ME times MS. Again, this is your mu B, and there is a G factor. G factor is nothing but it tells you that how this magnetic moment is connected with respect to mu B, and there is a correction factor for the spin, and for spin motion it is generally considered as 2. So the magnetic moment due to spin is generally given by plus minus mu B, and that is how this magnetic moment in any material arises because of either orbital motion or the spin motion of electron in any atom. And if you apply a magnetic field, as I discussed earlier, that in the presence of magnetic field, you have this m dot h energy. So suppose your one of the magnetic moment is plus half and another magnetic moment is say minus half, then in the presence of magnetic field, one of the energy will up and one of the energy will come down. And what will be the difference? The difference will be, because this will go by mu b up and this will go by mu b down, so the difference will be like 2 times mu b into effect into the strength of magnetic field. So if you keep on increasing the magnetic field, the separation will keep on increasing between the spin magnetic moment states. Why that separation is increasing? Because energy is given by m dot h, so it is proportional to it. So if you keep on increasing, the separation will keep on increasing. Now, this was the origin of magnetic moment in any atom. Right now, what happens if I put that atom in presence of some magnetic field? Remember, at present I'm talking only about the atom, I'm not talking anything else. Right now, if I put this atom in the presence of magnetic field, what it will do? I mean, you can simply think that you have magnetic moment, orbital magnetic moment, as well as, but in the presence of magnetic field, as I said, that their energy actually changes. So energy of the magnetic moment is given by m dot b, right? And what is the purpose of this energy? The energy is minimized when your magnetic moment is aligned in the direction of magnetic field, right? Now, what is the if you look at this magnetic field, then another effect of this magnetic field is that it creates a torque, and that torque is given by m cross b on the current carrying loop, which we have discussed earlier, right? And what is the purpose of this torque? This torque will try to align this magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic field. But remember, your torque is like m cross b, and so the moment it tries to align, but you have this magnetic moment connected with your orbital magnetic moment also. And since they are connected with the orbital magnetic moment, so electron is continuously orbiting around the nucleus, and you have a torque which tries to align this magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic field. So you have actually two types of forces acting to each other perpendicular, right? Because this torque is perpendicular to magnetic moment as well as perpendicular to the magnetic field. So what it does, it tries to align this magnetic moment in the direction of field, but at the same time, your this electron motion, it just spins. And because of these competing factors, the change in the magnetic moment, this m with the time tm, is perpendicular to both m as well as this b. So what it does, it doesn't simply align that magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic field, rather it forces that magnetic moment to precess around the magnetic field. So when we apply a magnetic field, we generally say that the magnetic moment aligns in the direction of field. Remember, it doesn't align actually. It what only it does, it allows the precision of that magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic field. Remember, what is the difference here between this electrical dipole and the magnetic dipole? In the electrical dipole, remember, you have the moment you apply electric field, the electric field used to align that electric dipole in the direction of it. But in this particular case, you cannot align that magnetic dipole in the direction of magnetic field, because here your magnetic dipole is connected with the orbital motion of, or the orbital angular momentum of the electron, and that orbital angular momentum is not allowing that magnetic moment to align in the direction of field, rather it only forces the magnetic moment to precess around the magnetic field. So this is a very important information, and the z component of that magnetic moment becomes constant, and generally what we talk about is nothing but only this z component. And how do we calculate the frequency of this precession? Precession is nothing but the motion of that magnetic moment vector along the external magnetic field. So this frequency you can always determine by this particular expression, and that frequency is nothing but the Larmor frequency of the electron. So remember, the effect of this external magnetic field is to force that magnetic moment to precess around the external magnetic field. Okay, now what happens? Because of this precession, since your electron is precessing around the magnetic field, you have an induced current. And because of this induced current around the nucleus, it is given by Q by T. Again, your Q is like E into 1 by T is nothing but the frequency. So this is given by E into Larmor frequency. And because of this induced current, again, you have a magnetic moment. So whenever there is a current in a loop, you have a magnetic moment. So because of this precession, because of this induced current, you have a magnetic moment, which is given by I into A, right? So this I is again given by here minus E into Larmor frequency. So if in your atom you have Z number of electrons, so the total charge is given by ZE multiplied by Larmor frequency, because all these electrons are actually precessing, all these electrons are filling the external magnetic field, right? So if you just put all those values, what do you get? is that magnetic moment, because of this precession of magnetic orbital magnetic moment, gives rise to an additional magnetic moment, which is given by minus ZE square average of R square into strength of magnetic field divided by 6 times mass of the electron, right? So this is an induced current. What was the origin of this induced current? The origin of this induced current was the charge nature of the electron. And because of that charge nature, we had this orbital motion, we had this orbital magnetic moment, we had this spin magnetic moment also. But because of this orbital magnetic moment coupling with the orbital moment, you have in the presence of external magnetic field, you have a precession of this magnetic moment around the magnetic field. So it induced a current, and because of that induced current in a loop, it created additional magnetic moment, and that additional magnetic moment, friends, you can see, is negative in sign. The negative in sign indicates that it is acting opposite to the external magnetic field. Abhi kuch yaad aa raha hai? What is diamagnetic material? Diamagnetic material is nothing but the moment you apply external field, and if your material aligns or has a tendency to align in the opposite direction of the external field, those materials are called the diamagnetic. Right? So remember, यहाँ तो हमने ऐसा कोई रिस्ट्रिक्शन लिया नहीं कि किस टाइप का मटेरियल डायमैग्नेटिक होगा, हमने तो इसे जस्ट चार्ज नेचर ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉन स्टार्ट किया था, और उस चार्ज नेचर ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉन का बिहेवियर इन द एक्सटर्नल मैग्नेटिक फील्ड देखते देखते अपने को पता चला दैट इट क्रिएट्स अ मैग्नेटिक मोमेंट व्हिच इज नेगेटिव इन डायरेक्शन. So that contribution is the diamagnetic. So what does that indicate? That diamagnetic is kind of a universal phenomenon. जहां कहीं भी चार्ज है वहां diamagnetic है, right? So be it any type of material, diamagnetic contribution will be always there. Only thing is that in other materials its contribution is far negligible than other contributions. Therefore we do not consider them. But to say कि क्या diamagnetic contribution paramagnetic material में हो सकता है क्या? Answer is certainly yes. जरूर होगा, क्योंकि diamagnetic होने के लिए कुछ नहीं चाहिए. What you need is the charge nature of the electron. So wherever there is charge nature and you have a current loop, you will have a diamagnetic contribution. So what are the properties of this diamagnetic contribution? You can quickly see that this is opposite to the external field. Number 2, you can see that this is proportional to the magnetic field. So if you keep on increasing the magnetic field, your diamagnetic contribution is linearly increasing, but with negative slope, because this is negative, right? Does it depend on temperature? In this whole expression, see, you have Z number. It doesn't change with temperature because this is property of atom. Charge nature, it is independent of temperature. R square, this is the radius of orbit, and it has a negligible dependence with the temperature, frankly speaking. You have this mass of electron, again independent of temperature. So what does that mean? The diamagnetic contribution of electrons are independent of temperature, and what you will see that this kind of behavior. Suppose this is your origin, then your diamagnetic contribution is negative and is constant, right? So this is independent of temperature. All materials will exhibit a diamagnetic response, right? Only those that have no other magnetic behavior, हम लोग जनरली उसी को बोलते हैं डायमैग्नेटिक मटेरियल, जिसमें बाकी कंट्रीब्यूशंस ना दिखे. लेकिन सत्य यही है कि ये कंट्रीब्यूशन अपने को हर मटेरियल में दिखता है. Only thing is that we tend to ignore them, right? So which materials are pure diamagnetic and there is no other contribution? So those elements or those materials which have closed shell, which have electrons paired, there are no free electrons, there are no unattended electrons, there is no there are no single spin electrons. So all electrons which are filled up or filled shells in the atomic orbital, they are classified as diamagnetic, right? Like H2, N2 and things of that. Now another class of material is the paramagnetic. What is paramagnetic material? So at present we have just talked about the origin of magnetic moment and what will happen if we apply an external field to the magnetic moment, right? So it created a kind of external additional contribution of diamagnetic moment. Now, suppose I talk about those atoms which have like only one type of spin electron in their electronic configuration. Okay, let me take say aluminum. So you have outermost only one electron, S1, right? Or any other element which you can think of, right? So in all these materials, you can see that you have only one. So your electron is having like orbital magnetic moment as well as spin magnetic moment. Okay, so suppose if I'm talking about a configuration of say 3p2 type of electrons. So in this 3p2, you have 2 electrons unattended, 2 free electrons, 2 with up spin electrons, right? So they will have, if I consider the electronic configuration of P, your L can be +1, 0, -1, right? And S can be +½ or -½. So this L of these 2 electrons will be one of them, for one of them it will be 1, and for one of them it will be 0, right? So this will give rise to a finite orbital magnetic moment also, or the spin magnetic moment also. So here I am talking about those types of atoms, right? So suppose in your material you have all types of atoms, right? And all of them are randomly aligned. Okay, now what you do, you apply an external magnetic field, this B. So what is the work of this B? This work of this external field is to align that magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic field, right? So it gives rise to energy minus mu dot B. What is mu? Mu is the moment of individual spin. Okay, it gives rise to minus mu dot B. Okay, so the energy is given by minus mu B cos theta, where theta is the angle between the random magnetic moment and the external magnetic field. Okay, now at any temperature, what is the probability that this magnetic moment will align in the direction of magnetic field? So the moment we talk about the probability, we talk about the comparison between the 2 energy state, we immediately come to the Boltzmann equation. The Boltzmann equation tells us that the probability of happening an event of energy even with respect to energy E2 is given by e to the power minus E1 by E2, right? So here the another energy is the thermal energy. What is the role of thermal energy? The role of thermal energy is to randomize these magnetic moments. Okay, so and what is the role of this magnetic energy? The role of magnetic energy is to align that magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic. So this is the competition between the 2 energy. So what is the probability that your magnetic moment will be aligned in the direction of field? That is given by e to the power minus E1 by E2. So E1 is your mu b cos theta divided by E2, which is your thermal energy. Okay, so this is about an individual spin. So on an average, the Z component, since we talk about only the precision of the magnetic moment, so I'm not talking about the overall magnitude of the magnetic moment, rather the Z component of the magnetic moment in the direction of field. Okay, so the overall average of the magnetic moment is given by this particular expression, right? The probability into the individual magnetic moment in the Z direction divided by the total number of such events, right? And if you just put all those values, so since your material will have n number of such atoms, so the total magnetic moment will be given by n times mu average Z component. And if you solve this expression, you will get this expression, right? This is nothing but the Langevin function. I'm treating this magnetic moment classically at present, right? So it gives us n mu times Langevin function, and where this a is nothing but mu h upon kt, or h is here I have taken h, I should have kept b. You can take anything actually, but I should have kept the same notation everywhere. Sorry for the confusion. Anyway, so you have n mu times Langevin function, which is mu h upon, and if you just expand this Langevin function, this is given by this particular expression. So what I'm trying to say, that if you apply external field across such randomly aligned magnetic moments, the average magnetic moment is given at any temperature, at any field by this particular expression. Okay. Now, if I consider the two extreme cases, suppose your magnetic field is very, very low as compared to the temperature. So mu h is far, far less than kT. In that situation, your La is given by A by 3 because other components, higher components become negligible, right? So your La is given by A by 3. So M is then in that case n mu times A by 3, where is n mu square mu 0 h upon G, right? So that becomes our average magnetization in this particular case. So that means at very, very high temperature, at very, very low magnetic field, your magnetization is given by this expression. Friends, this is nothing but the Curie's law. Okay. Now, what does that tell us? That tells us that M is proportional to H. So you have this kind of behavior. That tells us that M is positive. That is why you have a positive slope. That means your magnetic moment is aligning in the direction of magnetic field. Okay. What does it tell us with respect to temperature? It is inversely proportional to temperature. So if you plot this magnetization with respect to 1 by T, what it should show you a straight line behavior, right? Okay. Now, this is one information. Now, what will happen? You have a very, very high magnetic field and at very, very low temperature. See, the common sense will tell you, do not have to go to that expression. The common sense will tell you that at very, very low temperature, there is no thermal energy. If there is no thermal energy, then whatever magnetic field you are using, that will align the magnetic moment in the direction of magnetic field, right? So in the extreme case, all your magnetic moments will be aligned in the direction of magnetic field. So if you have the magnetic moment of an atom as mu, then for n number of atoms, in the optimal case, when all your moments are aligning in the same direction, the total moment will be given by n mu. And this is what this expression also tells you. Because for very, very high mu h and very, very low kT, when your A tends to infinity, your La becomes 1. And La becomes 1 means M equals N, right? So this is very easy to understand because here you are competing with the magnetic energy and the thermal energy. Magnetic energy tries to align in the direction of magnetic field. Thermal energy tries to randomize the magnetic. So this is the basic difference, right? So if you reduce the thermal energy, your magnetic moments will keep on rising, right? So this also tells you that with the lowering of temperature, the magnetic moment should keep on increasing, right? So these are the characteristics of paramagnet. Now, I generally ask, if I go to any interview to master's students and all that, do you always expect that M versus H behavior of a paramagnetic should be a straight line behavior? अब किसी से पूछो कि पैरामैग्नेटिक मटेरियल का M वर्सेस H बिहेवियर प्लॉट करो, वो सीधा जाते हैं M वर्सेस H और स्ट्रेट लाइन प्लॉट करते हैं. बट रिमेंबर, दिस इज नॉट ट्रू. This is true only in a particular condition. And what is that condition? That at very, very low magnetic field and very, very high temperature. Because you will see that at other places, when your magnetic field is sufficiently high and temperature is also sufficiently low, then your behavior will be something like this. Okay. Remember, why does it happen? Because this Langevin function has this behavior. Okay. So you should not always believe that M versus H for a paramagnetic is a straight line behavior. This is straight line behavior is true only in certain condition in this particular region where your H is very, very low and temperature is very, very high. If you keep on increasing H, you will have this kind of behavior, saturating kind of behavior, because ultimately at very, very high magnetic field and your sufficiently low temperature, your La becomes 1 and that gives rise to M equals N. Okay. So this is all the classical analogy of the paramagnetic material. If I just treat this particular system in the quantum mechanically, then what happens that in quantum mechanics, your M actually taken care by J. J is nothing but L plus S, orbital magnetic moment plus spin magnetic moment, and you have then discrete values of these J values. यहाँ तो हमने एक random value ले लिया ना, because here theta could have been anything, right? So theta was gradually changing from say 0 degree to pi by 2 or 0 to pi, right? But in this particular case, this is not the integration. And in that case, you will have a summation of different magnetic moment values, right? So that is why this thing comes, and there is no much difference between these values, right? So quantum mechanically, if I treat this magnetization, then the expression or this Curie-Weiss behavior takes care of takes this type of shape, but behavior remains more or less same, and this Langevin function is replaced by Blois. Okay. Now I'll just show you some of the typical examples of paramagnetic material and whatever I have talked about. See, this is one of the ER203 which we have measured, and you can see that if we lower the temperature, the magnetization keeps on gradually increasing. And this is consistent with this kind of expression where your magnetization is inversely proportional to temperature, right? Okay. Now it also tells us that if I plot this magnetization with respect to 1 by T, we should have a straight line behavior, right? See, this is the straight line behavior, okay? And these measurements are done at 2 different fields. That's why you have 2 different slopes, okay? And from this slope, the slope is depending on n mu square mu 0 h upon 3k. From here, you can calculate the magnetic moment coming from individual atom, right? Or the Curie constant that people generally call. So that is how you can easily calculate. Okay, I talked about this MH behavior. You see that how this MH behavior looks like. I've shown you 2 different regimes. See, at 300 Kelvin, which is the blue one, your MH behavior is simply straight. At 100 Kelvin, your MH behavior is still straight. At 10 Kelvin, you can see that it is straight in this particular region, but at higher magnetic field, there is some non-linearity. At 1.8 Kelvin, you can see this has a tendency of saturation, but at the lower magnetic field, this is still straight, right? So, do not always feel that in your paramagnetic material, your M versus H behavior will be a straight line behavior. This is very, very essential. Okay. Now, I talked about J, which is nothing but the L plus S. What is L plus S? Let me just tell you. This is spin orbit coupling. LS is very close to me. I love this LS coupling behavior, because this tells you that how do we look at the system and how the system is looking at us. In what way? See, if you at present we are just considering that electron is revolving around the nucleus, but electron will also think, okay, I'm constant, it's nucleus which is revolving around, right? So for an electron, since nucleus is also revolving around the electron, so it will also feel a kind of current loop, and that current loop will be given by ZeV upon 2 pi r. Right? Now Z is the atomic number. Right? This will create a huge magnetic field, and because of this magnetic field, the magnetic moment of that electron will get modified. Right? So the energy of, because this will create this magnetic field, and because of this magnetic field, the energy of that electron will get modified, which is nothing but this spin orbit coupling energy term, right? And so what it does, I mean, earlier we used to think that, okay, we have an independent spin magnetic moment which is precessing around the magnetic field, and this L which is precessing around the magnetic field. But when you have the strong LS coupling, then both of them are combinedly precessing around the external magnet. So that is the advantage of this spin orbit coupling, and because of that, you have a modified ground state also. And for how this spin orbit coupling will take place, that depends on whether your outermost electronic structure is more than half filled or less than half filled. If you have less than half filled, your LS coupling or the magnitude of J will be governed by L minus S. Otherwise, it is L. Okay. Now, there are many paramagnets which do not obey Curie law, but they follow Curie-Weiss law. What does that mean? In Curie-Weiss law, see, we talked in paramagnet that the magnetic moments are randomly aligned to each other. They are not knowing each other. They are completely unknown to each other. Okay. Now, if they are completely unknown to each other, then what we discussed in the previous slide was valid. But suppose they are talking to each other. If they are talking to each other, when I say they are talking to each other, means they are coupled to each other, or in a way, they are creating a local magnetic field to interact with the neighboring magnetic moment, right? So in that case, the total external field that your electron will see is the external field plus the internal field which its neighbor is actually creating. We all are affected by our neighbors, right? Because we give importance to our neighbors, right? So in this particular case also, that the kind of local field that the neighboring electron is creating gives rise to internal field, and that acts along with the external magnetic field. And because of this nature of this HW, your Curie-Weiss behavior, which was earlier only M by H equals C upon T, gets modified, and you have this additional contribution of this internal field. It is proportional to the magnetization. So as they are aligning, it is giving rise to, it is proportional to that kind of magnetization, right? So H plus gamma M. So depending on the nature of this gamma M behavior, whether it is positive or negative, we have two types of material, which is either ferromagnetic or antiferromagnetic. So what are the ferromagnetic materials? Where there is kind of internal field which is tending to align the neighboring magnetic moment in its direction, or which is coupled to each other, right? So that type of material we term as the ferromagnetic. See, ferromagnetic material cannot be easily, or the origin of this internal magnetic field cannot be easily understood by considering, ठीक है, जिस तरह से हम लोग दो चार्ज के बीच की बात करते हैं, that if we have two charge, they are interacting with each other by Coulomb force, which is Q1 Q2 upon R square. So similarly, we have these magnetic dipoles with magnetic moments M1 and M2. So they may interact with each other by M1 dot M2, and their energy will change by upon R2. That is not true in this particular case, because if you just calculate that energy gives rise to the ordering temperature only 1.3 Kelvin, right? So which is very, very low. We know that the Curie temperature of many materials are in thousands degrees centigrade, right? So certainly it's not the dipole interaction which is causing this alignment of the neighboring magnetic moment with each other. It's something else. And what is that something else? That something else is the origin of exchange interaction. What is that exchange interaction? Exchange interaction arises from the fermionic nature of the electrons. Because of the fermionic nature, they are indistinguishable, and their total wave function becomes antisymmetric. And because of that antisymmetric, you get all types of behavior, right from the Pauli's exclusion behavior to the Hund's coupling. It gives rise to this kind of energy, right? And what does that gives us? It gives us that this exchange energy, when it is positive, then the spin singlet state is higher than the triplet state. Now, what is a spin singlet? Okay, let me just tell you. Suppose you have an atom with two electrons with opposite spin. So two electrons with opposite spin, the total spin becomes 0. So if total spin becomes 0, then the total number of what is the multiplicity? Multiplicity we divide 2s plus 1. So 2 into 0 plus 1 is 1, right? So you have only one energy state. But suppose two electrons which are parallel to each other, then both of them align. So half each, the total spin becomes 1. So what is the multiplicity? 2s plus 1, that is nothing but 3, right? So that becomes the triply popular. Right? So you have spin singlet as well as triple multiplicity. So spin singlet or the singlet state energy is higher than the triplet state. What does that mean? That energetically, which is favorable, the favorable energy state is the lower energy state. The lower energy state is the triplet energy state. The triplet energy state is nothing but when your spins are parallel to each other. So that gives rise to the ferromagnetic arrangement. And if your J is negative, then triplet energy state goes up and ES comes down. That means your spin singlet is stable. That means your antiferromagnetic state is more probable. So that is how this internal field or the molecular field is related to the exchange interaction between of the two electrons, where you just exchange the position of the individual electrons, and you see that you get an additional energy state, which is given by 2j square times this integral expression. Okay, and from there we get this kind of idea. Please remember that this internal energy, this internal force or the exchange energy is also competing with the thermal energy. When your thermal energy is sufficiently high enough to overcome the internal energy or the exchange energy, then that thermal energy decouples that electrons which were interacting with each other earlier. And when they decouple, then they again become completely independent of each other and they turn into the paramagnetic. But when your thermal energy is lower than the exchange energy, that means your system is having some kind of magnetic ordering. That ordering we call as either ferromagnetic or antiferromagnetic, depending on the sign of the exchange interaction. And the sign of exchange interaction depends on the material's property, the way those electrons are configured and all that, right? So that is how we classify ferromagnetic and antiferromagnetic material and paramagnetic. All these materials are paramagnetic beyond a critical temperature. That critical temperature can be Curie temperature, that can be Neel temperature. Okay, because beyond that temperature, there is no exchange force acting between those electrons to put them aligned, because thermal energy has overcome that exchange energy and all those electrons have become the paramagnetic state. Only below that particular temperature, where thermal energy is lower than the exchange energy, your magnetic ordering takes place. Either it becomes ferromagnet or it becomes antiferromagnet. These are the examples of ferromagnetic cases which I have. Dr. Saab, will you please tell me how much time do I have more?
I think you can go 10 more minutes.
Absolutely fine. Okay, so I just talked about the exchange interaction. What are the types of exchange interaction? You can see that we have, I have just classified here 3 types of exchange interaction. One is the direct exchange, which we generally talk, or which I just talked about. The two magnetic moments are very close to each other and the magnetic field is sufficiently enough to interact with the neighboring thing, right? And there is another which is super exchange interaction. In this super exchange interaction, the two magnetic moments which are talking to each other, they are not directly connected with each other, rather they are far apart from, they are away from each other, but they are connected by some kind of non-magnetic ions like oxygen. If you take the example of Mn2O3, the two manganese ions are separated by oxygen in between, and those two manganese ions are interacting each other by this super exchange mediated by oxygen, right? So the electron of oxygen, manganese electron and this manganese electron, they all are hybridized in a way that it leads to kind of super exchange interaction. Another interaction is the indirect exchange interaction. The two magnetic moments are far apart from each other, but how do they talk? They talk each other via some kind of charge carrier, conduction electron, right? I mean, this is like coronavirus. It started somewhere in China, but one person carried that information to the next person carried that information to the third person, and that is how this entire world is connected. And today you can see that all of them are kind of interacting with each other. When I say interacting with each other, it means they all are either corona positive, or they all are affected, or some of them are still left, or many of them are still left. But you can see that how it is percolating. So similarly, in this particular RKKY type of interaction, or the carrier mediated magnetic exchange interaction, it's the charge carrier which is delocalized in the entire material. It comes in the vicinity of one of the magnetic moment, gets polarized, and while it is moving, before it loses that information, it interacts with another magnetic ion and transfers its previous information to the next magnetic ion, and then again gets polarized and then transfers to the next, right? So that is how it is conduction electron mediated charge carrier. So these are the types of interaction which are present in or exchange interaction in many of the magnetic materials. And that is how this magnetic hysteresis behavior looks like in any ferromagnetic material. Maybe I will just skip this part because it depends on many of the parameters, that there are magnetic domains, how those magnetic domains are created. See, the magnetic domains are created because of this exchange energy, right? And what is the role of this exchange energy? Is to align all the magnetic moments in the direction of magnetic field, right? But as you keep on aligning, then there are other energy like the magnetostatic energy, magnetocrystalline energy, magnetostrictive energy, and all these competing energy come together to fight with this exchange energy. And then therefore your ferromagnetic material is not like a single domain material. They are consisting all types of different types of domains, and all these different types of domains are kind of randomly oriented. Therefore, in a normal zero field state, the total or the net magnetization becomes zero. And as you keep on increasing the magnetic field, then you will see that there is a kind of like alignment advancement of the domains, and that is how this hysteresis behavior comes. I'm not going into that picture. See, only thing that I will tell you, that why this does not follow the original path, that is because when this domain wall was moving, it encounters some kind of imperfections, some kind of defects, and because of that defects, the magnetic flux lines are kind of pinned across that defect, and you need an additional energy to overcome that pinning, and therefore your magnetization lags behind the magnetic field. So even though if you have reduced the magnetic field to zero, your magnetic material still contains certain magnetization. So that is the remnant magnetization. Okay, now in antiferromagnetic material, we know that we have an overall antiferromagnetic alignment or the negative exchange interaction. So below that nil temperature, what it does, it drops the overall magnetization of the material, right? So at a glance, this is how this diamagnetic or ferromagnetic or antiferromagnetic, you can see that in antiferromagnetic material, beyond this particular temperature, your system is behaving this kind of paramagnetic behavior. But below the ordering, since the moment have started aligning anti-parallel to each other, your moment starts dropping down. Okay, so these are the references which I have followed, and these are the tools that we use to measure the magnetic properties of different materials. Vibrating sample magnetometer and the squid magnetometer. In vibrating sample magnetometer, you just oscillate your magnetic material, and once you oscillate, then magnetic flux line changes with time, and again Faraday's law comes into picture. And what does it say? That whenever there is change in the magnetic flux lines with time, we get an induced voltage. And if you can measure induced voltage, we can calibrate that how much was the magnetic moment. With that principle, this VSM is working. Then we have this squid magnetometer, and in that squid magnetometer, we use this Josephson junction, and the Josephson junction has the property that flux is quantized, and how this quantized flux is varying under the presence of certain induced current. If that can be measured, we can measure their properties also. There are a wide range of magnetic materials. Fe3O4 was one of the earliest material which was discovered, and dilute magnetic semiconductors. We have permanent magnets and all that. I will just briefly talk about the dilute magnetic semiconductors. In dilute magnetic semiconductors, you have a semiconductor material which is non-magnetic in nature. And when I say non-magnetic in nature, what does that mean? Either it can be diamagnetic or it can be paramagnetic, right? There is no magnetic ordering. There is no internal field. There is no exchange force acting between the magnetic moments. And the purpose is to induce magnetization in the system, because we know that semiconductor has a different domain of applications in logistics and all that, logic gates and all that. And magnetic materials are used in read head devices, memory devices, and all that. So the idea was to integrate these two fields together, and that is why people thought of inducing magnetization in this otherwise non-magnetic semiconductors. So the magnetic moment which we are doping are not at one place. They are rather uniformly distributed in the material, and they are far apart from each other. They are not in direct contact with each other. So in this cartoon, you can see that these are the red balls which show you this magnetic impurities which are far apart from each other. So then how do they talk? They talk via charge carrier of the electron. So the exchange energy or the indirect exchange interaction which I talked about is applicable in this kind of dilute magnetic semiconductors. So these magnetic atoms interact with each other via some charge carrier, and in that way you are not confining the magnetism only to the magnetic materials, but also can induce in non-magnetic. So there were certain proposals which was proposed that okay, you can do this RKKY interaction, and then there was another bound magnetic polar. I'm not going to this bound magnetic polar model, but just briefly tell you that it requires certain defect state, and that defect interacts with the magnetic moment. And with the increase in the radius of this circle of polaron, you can have a long range ordering of ferromagnetism in the system. So that was the idea which was given. And we just worked on this kind of material of iron doped TiO2 material. There were certain issues, and the issues were like the magnetic impurity that you are doping in the system, whether it is forming a cluster or whether it is uniformly distributed in the material. How do I confirm this? See, if I dope iron into the material, it can happen that iron form a cluster of its own. वो कहीं uniformly distribute नहीं होगा. See, substitute का मतलब होता है that in your matrix or in your crystal structure, you are replacing the host atom from the dopant. If that is not the case, if all the dopants are forming a cluster of their own, उसको किसी ने जगह नहीं दिया अपने घर में आने के लिए, तो बेचारा आयरन जाएगा कहाँ? वो अपना एक दुनिया बना करके एक जगह बैठा रह जाएगा. तो उस केस में जो मैग्नेटिक प्रॉपर्टी आपके मटेरियल का आएगा वो सिर्फ उस मेटल क्लस्टर के कारण आएगा, उस पूरे मटेरियल के कारण नहीं आएगा, राइट? सो उस केस को तो आइडिया तो ये है कि आपका पूरा मटेरियल यूनिफॉर्म मैग्नेटाइज होना चाहिए. तो इसको कैसे चेक करें? तो उसको चेक करने के लिए आपको कुछ क्वेश्चंस पूछने चाहिए अपने को कि ये जो आयरन मेटल क्लस्टर है उसको कैसे प्रूव करेंगे. तो अगर मेटल क्लस्टर है तो उनके बीच मेटल मेटल बॉन्डिंग होगी. तो मेटल मेटल बॉन्डिंग है या नहीं उसको कैसे चेक करेंगे? तो उसके लिए उनका चार्ज स्टेट मेजर कर सकते हैं. चार्ज स्टेट कैसे मेजर करेंगे? Then we have certain techniques like X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy and all that, and from there you get an idea whether your charge state is 0 or it is something else. See, in case of metal cluster, you will have a metallic bonding between iron, so the effective charge state will be 0. If it is substitutional, your effective charge state will be 2 plus or 3 plus, right? So this is one thing. Another thing is that agar मान लो, if because of this dopant it has formed a altogether different composition or different compound, then what you will see eventually is that your structure from TiO2 will differ, right? So to confirm that, what you have to do is to perform this X-ray diffraction measurements. And if you do this X-ray diffraction measurements, that will tell you whether your system is in single phase or not. If it was a different material, then it will not follow the same structure, right? So these are some of the tricks that one can always do. And from here you can see that we did this X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, and from there X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, you can quickly see that the charge state. How do we calculate the charge state? We calculate the charge state by understanding the binding energy. For different charge state of elements, the binding energy of electrons differ, right? So if iron was in metallic cluster, then this peak should occur at 706 electron volt. But what you see is that peak is occurring at 709 electron volt or so, right? So from there one can confirm that iron is present, not present in the metallic state, rather it is present in some kind of charge state, right? So from there we get an idea that your iron which you are doping in this system is substitutional in nature, because your structure was also single phase, your charge state was showing 2 plus 3 plus, not a indication of metal cluster. Now this is the magnetic property. You can see that the system shows very good clear cut hysteresis behavior. So from there we know that now system has started showing magnetic behavior also. Its Curie temperature is also way beyond 600 Kelvin. So from there we know that the purpose of doping iron in the system is justified. Okay, and the system also shows very low resistance behavior, and this you can see that the system shows high temperature metallic behavior and low temperature semiconducting behavior in TiO2. So if you apply magnetic field, now since the magnetic interaction is taking place via charge carrier, then under the application of magnetic field, the resistance of the material also changes. that change in resistance is measured by magnetoresistance percentage. So from these observations, you can see that the material actually shows magnetization after doping iron in this system. The dopant iron which we had in the system was substitutional in nature. It was carrier mediated magnetization. We had magnetization, but not because of the iron metal cluster. Why? Because had iron metal cluster been present, iron should have shown zero charge state, which was not the case. Number one. Had this magnetization coming from iron metal cluster, then we will not see the carrier mediated magnetization. How did we confirm carrier mediated magnetization? We confirmed by performing magnetoresistance measure. Because if it is carrier mediated, then under the presence of magnetic field, your resistance should change. And if your resistance is changing, that gives you an indication that in your system, your carriers are spin polarized. So these types of information we can always get. So finally, I will conclude that magnetization materials are interesting class of materials, and one can do quite wonders, and you can always connect the magnetic properties of a magnetic material with its structural property, with its electronic structure property, and remember, understand all these things at the elementary level, how the electrons are responding to those external perturbations. If you understand the behavior of electrons, you will understand many of these things. With these words, I will conclude. Thank you very much for your attention. I shall be happy to take up any of your queries.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Ram Chaudhary ji. I would like to request Secretary of this Science Lecture Series, Dr. Puneet ji. You must have questions from the audience side. Please ask on their behalf.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for your very wonderful talk. And you discussed the fundamentals of magnetism in a very lucid manner. And I'm sure the students must have learned quite a lot. So participants have several questions, and I would like to ask you on their behalf those questions. So,
Sure.
Mrityunjay Jha, who is a student of our university, he wants to ask, why don't we have any hysteresis loss in the case of paramagnetic materials?
Okay, fine. Okay, see, the origin of hysteresis was the presence of magnetic domains, right? The origin of magnetic domain was the exchange energy, right? Because exchange energy allowed those magnetic moments to align with each other, right? And that is why you had a domain. Domain is nothing but the collection of magnetic moments all aligned in the same direction. Okay, so, and the origin of that magnetic domain was the exchange energy. As I said that in paramagnetic material, there is no exchange energy between the two spins or the two magnetic moments or the two electrons. Now, since there is no exchange energy, so that means you are treating all these magnetic moments independent of each other. And if they are completely independent of each other, then they will not form a domain. And if you do not have a domain, then there is no hysteresis. The hysteresis arises because in the presence of magnetic field, your domain wall volume or the domain wall dimension, it increases, and when you reverse the magnetic field, it encounters certain imperfections, certain defects, and across those defects, your magnetic flux lines are pinned. And to overcome that magnetic flux lines pinning, you have to apply extra magnetic field. And therefore, you have a lagging between the magnetization and the magnetic field. And because of that, you have a coercivity or you have a hysteresis behavior. In paramagnetic material, जब domain ही नहीं है तो domain wall motion नहीं है, domain wall motion नहीं है तो imperfection हो चाहे defect हो चाहे कुछ भी हो, there is no pinning of the flux lines, so it just follows the same path.
Thank you.
So there is no hysteresis.
Sir, Sheikh Atri wants to ask, what is the method employed to distinguish the interactions that are present in the magnetic material? So you mentioned about direct exchange and other things. So
I shall be happy if you can repeat the question again. It sounds quite interesting question.
Okay, so what is the method which is employed to distinguish the interactions that are present in the magnetic materials?
What are the methods to make a distinction between the presence of different exchange interactions?
Yes, sir.
Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, I have, I can say that I can answer it and I cannot answer it, both of it. Because this is really a bit very challenging task. Of course, there are theoretical models which people generally follow to understand what type of interactions are present, but to experimentally confirm it, quite a few limited techniques which are available to us. For instance, X-ray magnetic circular dichroism is one of the techniques which will allow you to understand whether your system is ferromagnetically aligned or not, or in what way they are aligning with each other. Then neutron diffraction is another technique which understands whether your system is having antiferromagnetic ordering or ferrimagnetic ordering, or what is the kind of spin oscillation taking place in the system, or how that spin wave is actually propagating in your system. So these are some of the things that people generally do, but to directly get an idea, okay, one thing is that you should understand the structure very properly. If you understand the structure very properly, then you know whether the magnetic moments are kind of under direct interaction mediated via some oxygen or non-magnetic ion in between. So from there you can get an idea whether this is the direct interaction or the indirect interaction. Okay, from the structure itself. Now, in the indirect exchange interactions, again, you have wide range of interactions possible, like double exchange interaction, RPKY interaction, then you have this condo interaction also. Condo interaction is not actually the magnetic exchange, but it gives rise to some kind of scattering of the charge carried at very low temperature. But remember, to understand this double exchange interaction, your magnetic ion should be present in heterovalency, right? So if you have a heterovalency of magnetic ion, only then you will have this double exchange. So for that you have to understand the charge state of the magnetic ions present in your material. So all these things you can do to get an idea of what kind of ions are there and what are the possible exchange interactions. But to get the absolute answer, I think theory is the best way to go for it.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there is a related question by Digvijay Narayan Singh, who wants to ask, is it possible to have direct exchange interactions in oxide materials?
मेरा गुरु मेरे से ही म्याऊं कर रहा है, ठीक है, बढ़िया है. Okay, in magnetic oxide materials, is there possibility of direct exchange interaction? Certainly, there are possibilities. As I said earlier, it depends on their crystal structure. If the crystal structure of your magnetic oxide material is such a way that the magnetic ions are closer to each other rather than via oxygen and all that, then see, there is a certain all these interactions depend hugely on the distance between the two magnetic ions. So if the two magnetic ions are close to each other, then there are always a possibility of direct exchange interaction, right? Having said that, you cannot always rule out that there is no direct exchange interaction. Direct exchange interaction should be there, will be there, but the only thing is that in what fraction, in what weightage, what is the contribution. So that part one has to understand, right? So indeed, it is a possibility, but you have to understand how much distance is there, which one is dominating, whether it is the indirect or whether it is the direct. Yeah.
So he has a follow-up question that
Yes.
then how we can investigate this closeness.
नजदीकियां दूरियों को परिभाषित करती हैं. Okay.
How can we investigate this?
जी, ये closeness को ही मैं define कर रहा हूँ. Closeness is defined by the distance. Okay, and for different magnetic ions or for different structure, this distance is actually varying, and there is no direct answer to this. For that, I will just give you a better idea. To go to that Bethe-Slater curve, where what he has shown that how with R the exchange interaction is changing for iron, nickel, manganese, chromium, cobalt, etc. right? And there you can see that those R values are very critical, and they're close to that 1.8 angstrom or 2 angstrom or something like that. So those things depend on that. So you just follow that kind of curve, and of course it has to be it has to come from theoretical analysis more. Yeah. So for different elements, this distance is different. Yeah.
Sir, Sushanta Lenka, who is our student, he wants to ask, is there any correlation between the domain size of magnetic materials and their magnetization? And how can we calculate the size of the magnetic domain?
Okay, so the question is, does the size of domain determine the magnetization? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. अरे मित्र, जो magnetization है, that is the total magnetization, right? The total magnetization, when do we get? We get total magnetization when all the domains are aligned at sufficiently high field values, right? So when all your domains are aligned, then the total magnetization will remain same. So आपका जो size है, the size of domain will only determine the motion of the domains. इस तरह से वो vary हो रहा, right? It will determine the path of that magnetic hysteresis, but not the saturation magnetization, because saturation magnetization is when your all the domains are aligned in the same direction, right? So saturation magnetization will not depend on your domain size. If you ask me, will it affect the remanent magnetization? The answer can be certainly yes, right? Because remanent magnetization depends on all this domain size and shape. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Sanjukta Jaina, who is also our student, wants to ask, could you please explain more about this RKKY interaction?
Okay, in this RKKY interaction is the charge carrier, which is actually interacting with the magnetic impurity. Okay, and once it comes in the vicinity of the magnetic impurity, there is some kind of exchange interaction with the conduction electron. And because of that, that conduction electron is rather polarized. And while it is moving, since it is conducting, right? While it is moving, it carries the polarization information also along with it. And before it loses its polarization, if it comes in the vicinity of another magnetic impurity, then it transfers its previous history, previous information to the next magnetic impurity, right? And that is how those two magnetic impurities, which are far apart from each other, they are trying to talk to each other via charge carrier. I mean, this is like some kind of ये जो लॉकडाउन का सिचुएशन था, दो फ्रेंड एक दूसरे से बहुत दूरी पे बैठे हैं और बेचारे बात क्या करें, मोबाइल यूज नहीं कर सकते, पेरेंट्स हैं आसपास, तो फिर क्या करते हैं, दूध वाले को दे देंगे अपना चिट या अपना पत्र या वहां तक पहुंचा दो. So those informations are like, you know, shared by some kind of charge carrier which transfers that information. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Lakshmi Hathia wants to ask, can we take the magnetization value recorded at room temperature to calculate the Niels moment for cation distribution?
Sorry, please repeat the question yet again.
Okay. Can we take the magnetization value recorded at room temperature to calculate the Niels moment for cation distribution?
Okay, can we take the magnetization value at room temperature to calculate
Niels
temperature?
Niels moment for cation distribution. This is the question.
Okay, there is nothing like Niels moment, if I understand. I mean, I have not come across such terminology. Niels temperature can certainly be the case. So from the magnetization value, can I determine Niels temperature? The answer is certainly no. Okay. Now coming back to the next part, does the Niels temperature depend on magnetization? The answer is certainly yes. Now coming back to the other possibility of the question, whether this magnetization depend on the cationic distribution, the answer is certainly yes. Can we get an idea of the cationic distribution? The answer may be yes and maybe no, because for that we need to understand what kind of cations are present and what are the possible magnetic alignment of those magnetic ions in this particular configuration. For instance, Fe3O4. You know, in Fe3O4, your iron is present in 2+ and 3+ state. Okay, and because of that, and they are also present in tetrahedral sites. But this is ferrimagnet. right? And because of this ferrimagnet or because of this anti-parallel alignment between them, the net magnetization is not actually as high as one could expect for the ferromagnetic alignment, right? So from those informations also one can get an idea what is the kind of magnetic ordering present in the system. But certainly we cannot get an idea about the cationic distribution. Cationic distribution के लिए सबसे अच्छा है you do X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy or the or other such measurements, or even X-ray diffraction will be sufficient. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there is another question. Can there be both
Yes.
RKTY and Kondo interactions present at the same time in a
वाह
material?
वाह, ये प्रश्न कौन पूछ रहा है?
Sir, मैं
I want to know it.
So I am asking.
अरे वाह. Okay, Dr. Puneet, I appreciate this question. Yeah, there is possibility that both the interactions are present in the material, and this is what we have shown in iron doped TiO2 material. And Kondo interaction is related to some kind of localized moment which is not fitting in the overall magnetization of the material, right? Whereas RKTY is like of चलो घूम के आते हैं, magnetic interaction करके आते हैं, right? And both have kind of opposite behavior. Okay, one tends to localize and one tends to scatter the charge, whereas other tends to align the magnetic moment and all that. One is creating a spin singlet. Kondo interaction is all about forming the spin singlet, because the moment that charge carrier comes in the vicinity of magnetic impurity, तो वो अपने आसपास के चार्ज कैरियर के पोलराइजेशन को इफेक्टिवली इस तरह से अलाइन करता है that the net spin is zero. Okay, magnetic moment of that impurity is up, then the effective spin state of the surrounding charge state is likely down. So that's why it forms a spin singlet and it scatters the charge carrier. Whereas RKTY has both tendency depending on this R distance. So both are competing in nature, and therefore there is a model. I don't remember what was his name. There was long back a model given, and there they suggested that you can have coexisting of RKKY and Kondo interaction together in a material, and both these competing states give rise to quantum critical states also in the system. And for that, one has to control the charge carrier strength and the exchange interaction and the distance between them, right? So there is a possibility, yes.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to request
Welcome,
our
sir.
HOD sir to please proceed.
So, dear audience, we heard really very interesting, advanced, basic, motivational, and informative lecture on probing the magnetic material, magnetic property of thin films of magnetic materials by the Professor Ram Chaudhary ji of UGC DAE Consortium of Scientific Research Indore. A very interacting question and answer session. I will request coordinator of science lecture series, Dr. Vijay Rajji, please give vote of thanks.
So thank you, sir. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. I am honored and lucky to have the opportunity to give a vote of thanks on this special day. I particularly liked Professor Ram Janan Chaudhary's talk, where he explained the basic concept of the magnetism. सर आपने जिस हिसाब से मैग्नेटिज्म को एक्सप्लेन किया, ये बहुत ही अतुलनीय, अविस्मरणीय और अकल्पनीय था। और हमको लगता है कि हम जैसे जो नए टीचर अभी ज्वाइन किए हैं इस एरिया में, उनको आपने काफी मोटिवेट भी किया कि कैसे वो लोग क्लास में पढ़ाएं। और पर्टिकुलरली मैं तो इससे बहुत ज्यादा इंस्पायर हुआ हूं, और मैं तो कोरोना का भी शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहूंगा जिसकी वजह से आप पकड़ में आए सर। अदरवाइज तो बड़ा मुश्किल था आपका प्रेजेंटेशन कर पाना, आपका इतना बिजी शेड्यूल रहता है। सो सर थैंक यू वेरी मच सर, आपने हम लोगों को बहुत कुछ आज सिखाया और साथ में बच्चों को भी सिखाया। आई वुड आल्सो लाइक टू थैंक्स ऑल माय फ्रेंड्स टीचर्स फ्रॉम CUSB, particularly Dr. रोहित रंजन शाही साहब, Dr. नितिन चंद्रा साहब एंड Dr. लखविंदर जी, एंड और उन फैकल्टीज लोगों को भी मैं शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहूंगा जो इंडिया के डिफरेंट कोने से ज्वाइन किए, कश्मीर से कन्याकुमारी, गुजरात से नागालैंड, सभी लोगों का तहे दिल से शुक्रिया जो आप लोगों ने अपना समय दिया। I must not forget to thank the student who always gathered in such a great number and show their interest in such a webinar series. Finally, मैं अपने हेड ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट महोदय का शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहूँगा जिन्होंने अपना बहुत कीमती वक्त दिया, जो कि आज बहुत बिजी भी चल रहे हैं। एंट्रेंस एग्जाम हम लोगों की यूनिवर्सिटी का है, उसमें अपना कीमती समय निकाला। और मैं अपने फेलो कलीग डॉक्टर बुधेंद्र सिंह का भी शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहूँगा, जो हमेशा हम लोगों के लिए अवेलेबल रहते हैं, किसी भी टाइम कोई भी हेल्प हो जी जान से लगे रहते हैं। और भी बहुत बिजी चल रहे हैं अभी इस एंट्रेंस एग्जाम की वजह से। और सेक्रेटरी साहब का प्रोफेसर पुनीत मिश्रा साहब का, जो हमेशा जो है बहुत डेडिकेशन के साथ लगे रहते हैं। तो शुक्रिया सर आप लोगों का। सो आई वुड आल्सो लाइक टू थैंक यू वंस अगेन फॉर मेकिंग दिस इवेंट a very grand success. Now I request Professor Venkatesh Singh to allow to close this session and announce about the next talk, who is from Minnesota University.
So,
Thank you,
dear participants and colleagues, that's all for now. Next week, we will not be available with a speaker due to our very heavy engagement in the university entrance examination on September 19. I can assure you, we will be back with another wonderful speaker next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep thinking. Goodbye. Namaste, Jayanti.
नमस्कार जी।
थैंक यू सर, आपने टाइम देने के लिए।
थैंक यू सर।